to another episode of the Christian Buddy Show. Glad you are here. Please do not forget to follow my Instagram. It is My Health Motivator. And for that matter, if you would like to be a guest on the show to promote anything, a business, a book, an idea, anything, send me a DM, send me a message. I'm happy to answer those messages and happy to have you on the show. Speaking of books, my next guest coming up, Jerry Zehr, has recently written The Peacemaker's Path, coming out on August the 24th, and we're going to be discussing that amongst other things in today's podcast. So grab a cup of tea, grab a green tea, grab a coffee, make yourself feel at home, listen to the podcast, hit the sub, hit the like, hit the comment, drop a donut, whatever you want to drop. I'm all cool with that. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's get into it. Welcome, Jerry, to the podcast. How you feeling?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on and all your listeners.
Not a problem. So here at the Christian Buddy Show, we are a little bit controversial. So I'm going to send out the first controversial question. What is your opinion of homosexuality, and why is there such a backlash in the Christian community?
Well, it's interesting because having been a minister in the Christian tradition for 35 years, and before that, I worked professionally in theater and entertainment business out in LA. So I had gay friends. And as I came into the ministry, I was taken back by the kind of the homophobia that there was. And as I really started studying with the scriptures, it's interesting because I would say to people, do you know what Jesus said about homosexuality? And they'd say, no. And I'd go, that's because he didn't say a thing about it. In reality, the translation for homosexuality that was from the Greek was translated into English finally in about 1850, and the translation became the word homosexuality. Before that, the Greek translation meant older men with boys. It was about, in those days, you had in Greece, there was just sexuality was rampant, all types of things. And sometimes young boys, they were so poor, they would sell themselves as prostitutes, or older men would have boy toys. And so it was the exploitation of that really was what was being spoken about. And if you go and find the Greek translation and then understand what those words mean, that will help you understand that better.
Okay, so I understand the saying now, the Greeks invented sex and the Italians introduced it to women. So I think that kind of makes a little bit more sense. And kind of on the theme of this controversial questioning, I've got one more lined up, and I want to get your opinions on abortion. What are your opinions on abortion?
Well, I think abortion is a difficult issue, and it's like anything that people can use scriptures to justify their beliefs. And it's the challenge as I've studied all the world religions, I've been involved in interfaith work. It's like somebody always says, like, I take the Bible literally, word for word. And you have to believe what it says, meaning you have to believe what they say. Because the reality is nobody takes the Bible literally. You can't do that. If you took the Bible literally, you would pluck out one eye if you lusted after a woman. Women would still have coverings over their head. We'd have slaves. There are a lot of things that you have to take of the culture and of the time. Now, saying that, everybody has a point of view. And when you say this was Jesus's point of view on that, it's very hard for us to understand because we don't actually know what Jesus said. We have 4 writers of the Gospels who wrote 30 years later after his death and resurrection. They wrote about what they remembered Jesus telling them and what they expressed it. That's why you see some differences in scriptures from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, because these are the writers of these remember things a little differently. So some of the same stories that Jesus told have a little different slant with each one. So that's saying there is no absolute about abortion. I mean, I think each person has a right to their point of view, but I would challenge anybody to say, if you believe in pro-choice, and then you don't serve them communion, or you say they're not a Christian because they have a different point of view than you, I'm always like, gee, I'm glad you know the mind of God, because I don't know the mind of God, right?
Yeah.
And that I think we need to learn to value each person and respect them. And I realize abortion's some people are hardliners. They're like, if
Yeah.
because they believe it's life at the beginning of life, and some believe it comes at a later time, which is there's no easy answer.
There's definitely no easy answer to that question. And recently before lockdown, I was in the city and I was approached by some lovely people who were trying to explain the science behind abortion, and they were against the abortion option, and they were explaining that the fetus gains life at a certain time. And yeah, I think it's a really complicated question. And if I'm to kind of, I guess, yeah, it's I don't want to try and go down that rabbit hole on today's podcast, because today's podcast is about your book. You're recently bringing up your book. Did you want to just maybe give a brief? What is your book about, and about to the audience? Yeah.
Yeah, but and let me just come back for the abortion, because I think that
Okay.
this issue is another issue of where we see the polarization in our society. If people are on one side and then the other, rather than listening and respecting and valuing. For I think as a Christian, Jesus said over and over again, not to judge another, but to love another. And so we are to bring in the more unity and healing we can have in our country is when we listen and understand, because I've never walked down somebody's path, especially as a man. I think it's very hard for me to be a judgmental on a woman. I don't know her journey, and I don't know where she is on that. And so I think even as a minister, I think ministers who get very judgmental think like they can make these absolute truths are not coming with a sense of humility and a sense of respect of each other. So to say, my book is called The Peacemaker's Path, Multi-Faith Reflections to Deepen Your Spirituality. And the reason why I wrote this book was because of the polarization in our society, in the misconceptions, the way people look at others, somebody who's Muslim or somebody who's Baha'i or Sikh, who's a different faith. And we have this kind of competition within us that we always want to be, I'm better than you. I'm right and you're wrong. And that makes me feel important and feel special, because if my beliefs are, this is what I believe, then they must be right. And how can you have a different point of view than me and be right too? When in reality, I think we can both be right. We have different ways of our expressions, part of our journey. But what I have found is there are core teachings in all of our major religions that that there are. The teachings of Jesus, the core teachings of Jesus are in the Quran, they're in the Baha'i and the Sikh scriptures, Buddhist teachings, and Hindu. So I wrote this book taking 6 themes that are in all of our world religions, and I have written a daily reflection, and then I take the scriptures from these different world religions that kind of enlighten that theme that I'm speaking about. And then there's a prayer from a faith leader and some questions to reflect on. The idea is many of us haven't read the Quran, haven't read the Baha'i, haven't read the Sikh scriptures. But once we start to read those, we see, oh, you mean Muslims talk about loving your enemies? And the teachings of Buddha are very similar to the teachings of Jesus. Then we start to have a sense of respect of one another and find we have so much more in common than what divides us.
Okay. So it sounds like you have cross-pollinated all these different teachings and you've kind of brought it together to one. So I guess the next question is, why should I become enlightened? Why should I go down this pathway of spiritual awakening? Or for that matter, why should anybody go down this pathway of spiritual awakening?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think it's there are some people who don't acknowledge anything of spirituality. You know, they just think it's all science. I would suggest there's mystery in life. There is a deeper part of us, a yearning within us. What words do you use? You know, we can talk about that, but I have found that there is an awakening to my consciousness, to listening to that within. Some people speak about the divine within. Some people speak about the love within. I think it's more, you know, we use words about being mindful, being present in the moment. Those are all expressions that come out of whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism or some of Jesus's teachings in Christianity, but they are ways of getting ourselves connected, I think, with ourselves, the earth, the universe. Because for me, and I think we know in physics, there's energy cannot be destroyed. Energy is manifested. All plants and animals have some sense of essence to them. And there's a connection. I mean, you know, when I come home, my cats are there waiting for me to come home. I mean, they come to the door when my wife comes home 10 minutes before she comes home. I mean, there's something that transcends material for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's awakening and connecting with that, that this book is trying to help us do, because the wonderful thing about it is I didn't write a book of theology. Nobody would read that. This is 40 days. So each day you can take a reflection, 15 minutes to read the reflection, reflect on the scriptures, kind of open your mind to a new thought, a new concept that might help you open up to new questions and insights for your life.
New insights for your life. Okay. And it's interesting that you mentioned the idea of God and your cats knowing when you were going to get home, because there's been a few incidents. I'd like to share a few experiences in my life where things have gone. There's a lot of coincidental events that happen and you can't really explain. So, for example, one of the events was I lost my key to my swipe key to my apartment, and I thought, well, how am I going to get back in? You know, I can't get back in, and all of a sudden, a person comes out, and they happen to live on the same level on my apartment. So there's 8 levels. They happen to live on level 2. And they gave me the swipe key, and I was able to get in. And some could argue that was a sheer stroke of coincidence. The sign, you know, but I mean, I think there's so many events that happen in our life that can't be explained through. It's difficult to explain through the rational mind, through the scientific mind. It's only open to interpretation through God, through the spiritual, through the unknown, through, as you were speaking before.
Well, and you know, I have a more progressive understanding of God. The traditional way when I grew up was God was a being out there judging us, doing something. And I don't see God as a being. God as spirit. God is present of the universe and present in everything. So some would maybe say a higher consciousness, a higher power, a presence. But let me give you an example of this happened for me that is even more, I think, dramatic. I had cataract surgery when I was young. This was 30 years ago. Back in those days, it was a lot more difficult. And I was young, which meant that the eye was not hard. Like in older people, it's easy to cut into. It was jelly shaped. And so when the doctor did it, he didn't get all the cataract out. He thought it would flush out. So I'm at home, and the piece of the cataract blocked my tear duct. So now I'm having pressure in my eye. I'm starting to throw up. I'm starting to get dizzy. My wife is out on maybe 25 minutes away, some other direction. And she has the sense, I must go home. She literally turns her car around, comes home. I'm throwing up. If I hadn't got to a doctor, my eye would have hemorrhaged. I maybe would have died, right?
Yeah.
And because she was listening enough in tune to that connection that we had, she took me to the emergency room. That was fine. I was fine. And that began me thinking about the sense of our connection with people and with the world, and that energy that we connect with, that you can't explain scientifically, but there's metaphysical, and there's too many of those things. Now, I don't think life is predestined. Some people say all things are, all things are planned. It all has a reason. Like, oh, you got hit by a car. God has a reason for it. Well, I don't believe that. I don't think God makes bad things happen to people. I mean,
you can make bad decisions in life, and bad things do happen.
You can make bad decisions. Yeah. And if you're drinking and you go out driving, yes, or some terrible freak thing can happen. So I don't believe it's so much that everything has a reason, but you can make something good and meaningful out of those things in our life. You can choose either to become cynical and bitter, or you can choose to be open, and progressive. But that's that spirit within, the spirit of love, the power of people bringing together. And that, when I'm with people who come from different faith traditions, who have that respect for each other, there's a powerful energy. And when I'm with people who are very narrow-minded, very judgmental of other people, look down on other people of other faiths, or maybe even people who don't have a faith, and people are atheists or agnostics, and they look very down, and there's such a negative energy that you can feel that, you can experience that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, the agnostic community or the atheist community, and there's nothing, I'm not saying anything bad against this community, but I had one incident where I posted a video on YouTube about God. I had my beliefs. I believe in God, and I was condemned. I was a lot of but all through the rational mind. Like they were paraphrasing, and they were picking the exact words that I was saying, and I couldn't really defend myself because it was all through comments. It wasn't face to face. I couldn't physically see the person, so it was a bit of a blindside attack. But it's just interesting that, yeah, like you mentioned, there's a different energy. There's a closed-mindedness, there's a narrow-mindedness, and it's interesting why that is. I can't understand. The mind should be open, otherwise you can't receive information.
Right. Yeah, and so that was the whole thing about having the Peacemaker's Path, multi-faith reflections to deepen your spirituality, because it's to help people open them up to new questions and understandings on those. I love, like, Richard Rohr, who actually is a Catholic monk, but he made a statement that I use. He said, when you love something, you give it soul. Wow, I thought, now that's very interesting, because sometimes we always think of soul as an entity, but when you love something, you give it soul. There's something about the energy of love that's transformating. And I just think it's been unfortunate, because a lot of the conservative or evangelical Christians who've come out so hard against, like, homosexuals or people who were pro-choice or pro-life, they just drove, I think, a lot of people away from even thinking of spirituality, because it's like, well, if that's what it means to be a Christian or believe in God, I want none of it, right? And so I always say, don't blame God because people use religion as a battering ram, because those people would use, if they didn't use religion, they'd use something else to beat somebody up.
Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation. You can never win with these people. So yeah, I guess it's a difficult one to think about. And I guess the title of the title of the video or the podcast is, what are you willing to sell your soul for? And I guess that's a good question to ask. What are you willing to sell your soul for?
Well, it's interesting because when I was in the entertainment business out in LA, and I was 23, naive, going to, make my fame and fortune. That was the question that was being confronted with me, because I could go to these parties. Cocaine was strong. I had an opportunity where I was getting some headshots done for resume, and the guy said, "Look, just take off your clothes and let me take some shots, and I'll give you $100." Well, $100 back in 1978 was a lot of money, and it was, gosh, you had opportunities to do things to promote yourself, and yet you sold your soul sometimes for fame or fortune or what you did. And so my novel Blurring the Lines was all about my experience in that. But I think that's a question many of us have to deal with. I had a friend who was with a potato chip company, and he went to the grocery stores, and they would give the grocery store manager money under the table to promote his potato brand and put it in right placement. Now, it was illegal to do that, but it just was something they all did. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Actually, he felt, he felt bad about it because it wasn't straight up honest, and he ended up leaving that company, and that grocery chain got busted for doing that with a number of others later. So, it just is interesting how people start off maybe, but certain temptations, it's very easy to get seduced by fame, power, money, whatever.
It is a very attractive pearl. I don't know what word to use, but it's alluring, and most you see the old stereotypical celebrity or actor, their rise to fame, and then all of a sudden they start going to all these parties and things get out of hands, and then next minute Britney Spears, I mean, I don't know, she went off the rails for a stage there. So I think it's very difficult to turn down those distractions, those temptations in
It's
life.
very, and in fact, I think over in your country, Hillsong is a very big church over there, right?
Hillsong. I'm not familiar.
Yeah, Hillsong is, and the pastors, a couple of the pastors got busted because they were using all the money in the church for all their side things and girlfriends and other things. They lost their way. It isn't, it can be religious leaders. I mean, it is very difficult, and we're human beings, so we all fall short. We all make mistakes. It's part of the journey, but certainly, I think that's the challenge. Is the more grounded, the more centered we are, the more we know who we are, and live by our own core values and not the world values. Fame is seducing. I mean, that's why when I went to LA, I mean, it was all about me. It was all about, I'm going to become famous. I'm going to become this. And then I found out it was very empty. It was very superficial. And so, I left. I mean, I was out drinking and partying every night. And I remembered I could see myself just like a lot of other people did. 5 years from now, I'd be bummed. I'd be wiped out. I'd be dead. So I got out, and I wanted to get a different environment, a different lifestyle, different people around me. And then I came to find out that the people who all were famous and had a lot of money, what they really wanted was what so many of us who just have lives with family and some solid friends, so it's tough. It's tough.
It was interesting because you mentioned before we started the show, you talked about Joe Hashem, the world famous poker player from Australia. Actually, I went to primary school with his son, Anthony Hashem. So it's interesting that you have a connection, or you know him. So I
Well,
thought that
yeah,
was
it's kind of interesting. As a minister, you don't think of ministers playing in the World Series of poker, and there are some people in the Christian tradition who said you shouldn't be playing poker because it's gambling and that's a sin. And I said, show me in the Bible where it says you can't play poker. My philosophy always about gambling was as long as you do it within what you can afford. If you know that I'm going to go to Las Vegas or I'm going to go to a casino and I'm going to spend $200 on slots or craps and I can afford $200, then I see it as entertainment. It's okay. You're not going to become rich. They don't build these big casinos because people win at blackjack. Those games are all carnival games that rigged. Now, poker is different because there's no edge on the house. You're playing against other people. And I was a state champion in high school in chess. So I like the competitiveness and the detail. But what I found is over the years, as I was playing in poker tournaments, and I played with Joe Hashem and actually his coach, Jamie Glazier, I solicited some time with him to help me on my game. But what you find, poker players are like anybody else. They make a lot of money, but you see a lot of poker players who go bust because they go into the casino after the poker tournament and they play the slots or they play craps or they do something else and they lose the money on all the other things, not on poker, but on other things, right?
There's
it's hard. Yeah.
There's no focus. Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned something interesting there. You mentioned chess. Did you say you're a state champion at chess?
I was in high school, way back, long time ago. Yeah.
Right. And the reason I guess I brought that up is because I'm a bit of a chess player, not a very good one, but I'm curious to find out if you have a favorite opening or a favorite sequence of moves or anything.
I haven't played chess since my high school days. I quit playing. I don't even know if I could even go through that with you anymore. Yeah.
No worries. Well, yeah. I thought I'd give a shout out to the London Opening. I know I think Magnus Carlsen, he's the current world champion, I believe, Magnus Carlsen. So yeah, he's a phenomenal player to watch. So yeah, thought I'd just put that in. But
so what is over there in Australia, what is the sense of spirituality or opening to that beyond? Are people open to that, or are more people turned off to it, you think?
I want to say that most people are good people. Most people that you meet on the street are friendly. If you say hello to them, they'll say hello to you back. And I think there is a sense, I don't know, I think it's very hard to expand on that question, but I want to say that most people are spiritual, and that's probably my optimistic view of life. And yeah, that's to answer your question. I'd say that most people have that spiritual belief.
I think there's a movement within the United States where people are saying they're not religious, but they're spiritual. They're not tied down to a certain church doctrine or dogma or denomination, certain church, but they value, they see, Gallup poll still says 90% of the people in the United States believe in God in some way, and even 80% pray. But, it's a very 30% maybe go to a church or a faith community. But I do think that that's why I've been so committed to helping people build relationships between each other of our faith traditions, because I think people see the value, and once they learn about people, there's such a powerful dynamic that happens. A good example, there was a Jewish temple here in where I live in Carmel, Indiana, and there were swastikas spray painted on the temple. And that was on a Thursday night, and through social media, we came together, and it was on a Monday night. There was this temple could only seat 450 people. There was almost 1,000 people who joined together in solidarity with those people, joining together. Some who the place was full inside, people on the outside, and that they joined together to say, we stand together with you, even though we aren't Jewish, we are one in humanity. And the power of that was so rich. And then when they found, they because they had security cameras, they tracked the guy. They found who it was. It was this 18-year-old kid who and his girlfriend who motivated him. He had all the swastikas and all the stuff in his house, and he really doesn't understand. He just felt like the Jews are taking over, and I want to put fear in him. So he ends up going to prison because it's a hate crime. 18, his life is now ruined, and all these good things that came from that one act, positive things that came. Yeah. And I really wanted to go and say to him, if you knew what happened, would you still do that? If and I really believe he'd probably go, that was kind of stupid, really.
Yeah, there are some outliers. I guess there are some people that just have no rational comment or just common sense for other people, and I guess the perception of, I feel like there's a lot of anger in the United States. I mean, I could be wrong on this, but I feel like people are really angry, and I know that I can't speak too much into this. I'm not an expert, but because of the Constitution, because of the gun laws, people get angry. What's the first thing that they turn to? They've got a gun in there. They've got a gun in their house. And I know it's an oversimplistic view, and I know that there's other arguments for this, but I guess the question is, why are people so angry? I mean,
right. Well, I think, and it's not just happening in the United States. It happened in Britain. It's going on in India right now. So what I think is going on, and that's why we see this polarization, is as we become a global community in a positive way, we see, the white man is not the most dominant any longer. We are not, now we have people of other races, people of women in positions of power and authority. And so the white male in the United States, at least, and I say in Britain and Europe, feel very threatened. Like somehow I'm going to lose my power, my influence. And that's not even true, because nobody can take your power away from you. Your power is within you. But that's the perception that somehow somebody else is going to take my job. Those people are coming from Mexico are going to take my job. When in reality, we can't even get people, if it isn't for illegal immigrants in this country who are doing jobs that a lot of people won't even do. But more, you're seeing people, white men especially, who are frustrated and angry because they feel like their voice isn't being heard. That the liberal, the progressives are growing, and it's becoming that, and so they're feeling frustrated. Now, what I would say is there's needs to be value to listen to one another. I had friends who voted for Trump. I didn't vote for Trump. But they were not just crazy people. There were some crazy people, but these were some people who weren't racist, weren't bigoted, but they had certain points of reason that they voted for Trump. And I wanted to listen to it. I wanted to hear their reasoning rather than just judge them and block them into a whole group of crazy people. And that's what happens then when people who are extreme on the conservative side they see all liberals as these bleeding socialists. Well, that's not even true either. And so that's what's happened and I think some of it's been the media, talk radio. They love to perpetuate controversy, division. They want something to people watch. And so it always has to have an edge. And if you see people getting along and feeling like it's kumbaya, well, nobody wants that. We want to see blood and guts.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, with the media as now with social media we have, I mean, you're just overwhelmed with all those different voices, and it's a challenge to put some of that out, to get some clarity for yourself and be aware of what you're letting in. Does that make sense?
Yes, kind of. Yeah, it sounds like a messy and complicated topic to discuss. But you mentioned something there, the concept of the white man losing power, and I feel like this is such a dogmatic concept. This is such an ape like a tribal like concept that as humans we should evolve through. We should. I mean, for me, I'm a white male, but I don't see color. I see energy. I see people's energy, and if you're a good person, you speak the truth. You work hard. You develop yourself. Hey, I'm going to be friends with you. I'm going to try and get to know you because you're on a similar level to me. But if we, yeah, like that concept that we're stuck in our skin, this is just a temporary. For me, this is just a temporary experience. I'm going to be dead one day. This skin is just holding me together. This is just the glue. It shouldn't separate. It shouldn't separate people into tribes. It shouldn't. We should all be one, right? I mean,
Well, we should, but you have to realize you are an enlightened person. You are a person who's been open to seeing that. Where some people, education is part of it. You know, if you grow up in a certain area your whole life, I grew up in a very conservative church, Amish Mennonite, growing up in that way. I left that, but I still have family who are in little towns in Indiana, and they have a very narrow point of view because they've never been exposed to a gay person, to a Muslim, to a Jew, to somebody from another country. I mean, you know, when you live in a small town, that's your worldview. And so it just is part of who they are. Now, I think you're right that some of the white male issue is a generational thing. The younger, like anybody under 40, homosexuality isn't even really an issue for them. You know, that's like a no-brainer. But people over 40, generationally, are dealing with that, or a lot of men are dealing with that. So we have these white supremacist groups, and I don't know if you have any. Do you have any white supremacist
yeah,
groups?
well, I've seen them on the news. Yes, we do have them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, because they're people who, one, they've taught their children a certain way. They've indoctrined their children, and they grow up and they set such a hard mindset. But, you know, it's powerful when I've heard stories of somebody who was a KKK member and then was befriended by this black minister, and he actually helped him and they became friends. You know, once you broke out of that mold and got out, the heart can change. Love is powerful, and love, you know, love, I think, wins over hatred always in the end.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I think that's what's, I do think that's what's going on. And that's why I wanted people, I think if they read the book on Kindle, or they'll have it on, it's a hardback. It comes out August 24th, so people can pre-order it now and get the book then. But what I think will be is that as they have a better understanding, they can then help their other friends who maybe deal with it. I have a lot of friends who they're Christian and they go, you know, but I have a relative who says, well, you know, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus. And how do I respond to them? You know, how do I deal with that? Because truly, I believe Jesus, if you look at the teachings of Jesus about loving your neighbor, the Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the poor. I mean, he gives us this language of caring for the foreigner, making hospitality for the stranger. But you know, we want to, sometimes we want to make it that my belief is right and you're wrong because that makes me feel better. and
Yeah,
the
but
reality.
can I
Mhm.
just can I just point? Sorry to cut in there. Can I just
No,
point out?
please.
Can I just point in the flaw of that mindset? That so if you're a person in that mindset that I'm right, you're wrong, I'm going to take it back to chess, right? Because when I was starting out in chess, there's a very high chance that you're going to be wrong. Very, very high chance. Even if you're a good player, you can still make a mistake. So for that person to think that, hey, everything I do is right is a false, it's maybe more of an egotistical claim. I think that person maybe hasn't done enough self-reflection or been in the circumstance where they've been proven wrong. Because I mean, it hurts to be proven wrong. I mean, no one likes to be shamed, but I mean, it's very difficult to be right. It's to be right is very difficult as well. It's not easy to be right. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is you need to see life on both sides of the spectrum.
Well, and I think that that's the challenge, isn't it? To hold our beliefs that we have, but be open that I might let go
Yeah.
of some things. I might take something new. Now that's hard because some people just want, tell me what to believe,
Yeah.
they, to the minister or the rabbi, tell me what to believe and I can believe this, boom, boom, boom. And then I don't have to think about it. It's kind of like, my wife says, I don't have many choices of clothes. She loves to have all these choices. I like have 2 pairs of jeans, 2 pairs of shoes. I don't want to think about that because I don't want to think about clothes so much. And so I get it, with clothes, I'm the same way. I don't want to broaden my point of view because I don't really have any, I'm not good at it. And I don't see the world with those lenses. So, I mean, I think we can understand people who have a certain point of view, and I could say that's okay. And your point of view is totally different, and you think I'm going to go to hell, and that's okay. I'm still going to love you. I'm still going to love you, and I'm not going to take it personally. And I think the more that we can be open and ask questions, we don't always have to have the answers. And I think a lot of times we don't have all the answers. But I love people to read what you're doing with engaging guests, to think and reflect on maybe where they were, where they grew up. Do they believe the same things they did now? What are they holding on to? Are there some things in the past that they still hold on to that they need to let go of? Maybe there's some shame and guilt from something in their past that they still feel guilty about, and they need to realize that they can let go of that now, and live into their own potential and their fullness of life.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, you touched on a important topic there, which is I guess, to love others even when they're sending hate to you, and I think that is the test or the sign of a true powerful person. If you can love somebody that sends hate to you, I mean, that's not easy to do. It sounds easier than what it is, but it's definitely because I think as humans we like to hold grudges, and we naturally hold grudge, and we naturally we resent. I don't know what it is, but we just, yeah, some of our brain or our consciousness is just wired that way. I don't know.
Yeah, it is part. It's part of our animalistic, our primal fight or flight. And when you get wounded, emotionally, I mean, it hurts. And so part of us wants to strike out to hurt you back, you know, eye for an eye,
Eye
and
for an eye.
and yet we know that if we do eye for an eye, we all just become blind. And and the world, I mean, it's never going to bring hope and healing to the world. Yelling at another and screaming at another because they're terrible. That's why protests where people are yelling, I don't think do a lot of good. It just shuts people down. Talking, dialoguing, building relationships changes people's hearts, right? So, like when my mother, who when she grew up, gay people were wrong. She thought it was wrong, and it really wasn't until she got to meet somebody who was gay that then she changed her point of view. As much as I said that's a wrong point of view, it wasn't until she really came in relationship with somebody and went, that's a pretty neat person. I mean, they have a wonderful heart. I mean, I can't believe that God is going to damn them to hell because they're different than me. So it comes out of relationship.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of gay people, and yeah, I've got a few gay friends, and gay people are the best. I feel like they have a different energy. They have a happy. They're always happy. I feel like they're always happy, and not to say that heterosexual people are not happy, but I feel like there's just I don't know. I think like they're just happy people. They're just good people to be
Well,
around. Yeah.
at least in the United States, that's been a long time coming, because for a long time they were in the closet. They had to feel shame and guilt. There were some who were married in a heterosexual relationship, even though they guilt. So there was a lot of double life, a lot of torture inside. Thank goodness it's finally gotten better and to be able to have. But it's like any group of people. You don't want to make a canvas that all gay people are artistic. I know gay friends who go, I don't like flowers. I don't like, they say, don't stereotype me because I'm not that way, and it's that we could take each person on a one-on-one is really the challenge, right?
Yeah. And kind of bringing it back to you managed to perform on the Johnny Carson show. Now this is a long time before my time, and I just did a bit of research on the Carson show, and it was voted, I think, one of the top 10 shows of all time. So what was your experience like on the Johnny Carson show?
Well, it was kind of one of these situations back. They did Stump the Band, where they had people from the audience came. It looked like it was all impromptu, but it was very organized. You auditioned for that. So they knew what the person was going to sing, and if they didn't like it, they wouldn't let them sing. But the idea is I'm sitting in the audience, and he says, does somebody have a song to sing for Stump the Band? And then I raise my hand, and he goes right to me. I knew that he's going to choose me. And I had an old vaudeville song that I sang, and we did a little banter. It was nice, and it was fun. The funny thing was, 20 years later, when I'm a minister now, and I'm wearing a suit and tie, and I'm in a church, and the Best of Carson was being shown, and somebody saw me with my polyester suit and my hair split down the middle, and they were, they couldn't believe it that I was on the Johnny Carson show. So, yeah, I had some experiences there, but it was fun. It was fun, and I was single, but it was about my searching, trying to find, and what I want to encourage people, try to find that which feeds your soul, feeds your heart. If it's not soul, feed your heart. If you're in a bad job, in a negative place where you're always feeling like you dread it, or you're around negative people who are always doing drama, find some way to break that. Find some way to do something that, and when you're helping people, when you're doing something that brings joy to others, it comes back to you. Karma is a principle that's in all of our religions. What you put out will come back. And so I would encourage people to do that for their life.
And speaking of principles, are there any other universal principles or religious principles that that come to mind?
Well, certainly, I think, and in the book it talks about that sense of loving yourself and loving others, the sense of karma. The golden rule we see is in all of the religions, and those are some of those themes that I play out in that way. So but that's what I hope people look for. Okay.
All right. Well, look, it's been we've been going for about 50 minutes now, and I think that was a signal that you've got 2 minutes left. So I'm going to take that as you have to run. But is there any closing notes or any finishing notes that you'd like to tell the audience as well, or where can people find your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. They can go to my website, jerryzehr.com, and they can see the descriptions of both of the books. And I have some of my other things on my website. So that's probably the best place. And
So
they can reach out to me on my website if they want to contact me and have other dialogue with me.
Other dialogue, no worries. All right, I'm just putting up the website now. I'll just make sure that it comes up on the screen. Is that the website there,
That's
Jerry?
it.
Perfect.
Great.
All right, there you go, guys. And no worries. Thanks for listening, guys. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Christian Buddy Show on Spotify and on YouTube. You can type it in, you can find it. Enjoy your day, guys. Hope you learned something from this podcast. And thank you for your time, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you.